Do you feel that? The cold embrace of the end. What's up, guys? Okkotsu, and here we are to do a nice little breakdown / discussion on whether or not all the Jujutsu high heavy hitters are destined to face the end, if they're all destined to fall, or whether or not there is hope for the main fighting force of Jujutsu High, as noted by Big Janku before his untimely end. We have a hefty little chunk to talk about, so let's not waste any more time and let's hop right into it. Editing me. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. Fun fact, I do happen to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. And another fun fact, Jujutsu High does in fact have it on them and keep it on them at all times. I'm not just talking about the individual characters, I'm talking about the actual main fighting force of Maki Zenin, the ghost of the Zenin, Yuta Okkotsu, the blessed child, the second strongest sorcerer of the modern day, and depending on how you read 251, currently still the strongest sorcerer of the modern day, since Satoru Gojo fell, and finally the restless gambler himself, Hakari Kinji. These three are the main fighting force as summarized by Kenjaku. Now, admittedly, Kenjaku has made a bunch of miscalculations before. And, who knows, may have made some miscalculations again for the future, but we'll see. We'll see whether or not bro miscalculated or miscorrected or was incorrected or something like that soon enough. But he notes these three as the main fighting force. Note who is not mentioned here. Itadori Yuji. And once again, we'll talk about whether or not I believe Itadori Yuji is destined to fall another day. But I'll give light thoughts on that here. The main point of today's video is to discuss whether or not these three are going to be allowed to live. Now, for the longest time, we've been skirting around these three, dancing around them. They just haven't shown up. But at least one of them, now two, has made their way to the battlefield and started putting on massive impacts. And of course, you know the main man himself, Yuta Okkotsu. He had to get in there, and he had to start cooking, wrist a whipping, up in that kitchen with his domain expansion. He started going crazy and boo-goo bonkers. Left, right, no good night, because unfortunately they did not knock Sukuna out. But, of course, this does kind of clarify something that a lot of people were worried about, especially with the consistent and continued absence of characters like Yuta, of a character like Maki, who appears at the end of 251, and of Hakari Kinji, who has shown up, but also hasn't really shown up, you know what I'm talking about. The idea that the heavy hitters would kind of end up being useless, or just not have like any real impact on the story, or the battle with Sukuna, or any of the final antagonists. Well, that worry was crushed in the dust when Yuta removed the head of Kenjaku, and also began to cook viciously a scrumptious meal against Sukuna. The meal was delicious. 10 stars. Forget 5. So, Yuta Okkotsu is clearly having an impact on the narrative. I don't think that's arguable. He literally removed the head of the main, one of the main villains, now leaving us to battle against the true final antagonist. At least, seemingly. I still am a Kenny Coper, bro. I know his head got literally pierced, but think of that. I'll address the Kenny Coper in another video. But, with that being the case, Yuta Okkotsu is currently chefing up against the King of Curses right now, and was chefing up indeed. But even look, the other man that people were worried about, Hakari Kinji, he's doing something. It's just been a minute since we've seen him. It's only been 6 chapters. Like, this is 245 that I'm referencing here. But, like, in JJK and weekly manga time, we haven't seen this man, like, 3 months. Or at least it feels like that. Like, this man has not even gotten a mention in a hot minute now. And notably, he only gets half a chapter to himself. He doesn't even get a full chapter. So, like, it feels like forever and a day since we've seen him. But still, the fact that he's fighting Urume is massive. Realize the whole reason the cast is doing as well as they are against Sukuna is because Sukuna hasn't had any time to rest. He's had like 0 downtime. Remember, the man had to fight this dude extensively to the point where he was looking like this after the fact, and then was forced to incarnate by this madman who came out of nowhere. I was like, hey, I want to see you flex a little bit. And then he got flexed on. But still, this is a gauntlet. Sukuna essentially is running the versus fade right now. And thusly hasn't had any time to recuperate. If Hakari Kinji was not here, I want you to realize that Ube, they be causing some havoc. You know what I'm talking about? Like, they would show up and make everything more difficult for everybody else. Even if Sukuna himself wouldn't like it, we specifically see when Kashimo first shows up that Ube didn't care if Sukuna didn't like it or not. They were coming in to stop Kashimo from attacking. So Hakari is still playing a necessary role. Yuta Okkotsu is very clearly playing a necessary role. And heck, looks like with the end of 251, it seems like one final individual, the ghost of the Zenin herself, is going to have to play a very vital role in slowing down Sukuna, weakening Sukuna even more, wearing him down, currently piercing bro straight through the sternum. Not his stomach, but the sternum, doing lethal damage in our world. But like in JJK world, Sukuna will probably laugh at this. He's already literally smiling. But, like I said, we're not here to argue whether or not the casting crew, the heavy hitters, will do anything. It's pretty much guaranteed, right? Yuji wasn't going to beat Sukuna on his own. Come on now, this is Jujutsu Kaisen for a reason. What we're here to question is whether or not they all need to fall. Whether or not they do get to live. And what that could mean for all of the characters in the narrative at hand. And what it could mean for the ideologies of previously established characters, two of which may have already passed on. There's a lot to talk about. So let's tackle the biggest elephant in the room as of the release of 251. Yuta Okkotsu. Unfortunately, I'm not saying it's impossible. Like, once again, Yuta definitely has a lot of weight riding behind him. Don't get me wrong. Don't let any of my previous downplay of Yuta confuse you or make you believe that I don't see the vision. Yuta Okkotsu is insanely important. He's the previous main character. He's the second strongest sorcerer of the modern day, now the current strongest sorcerer. All that is true and valid and wonderful, but he got hit by World Slash. Once again, it's not impossible for him to still be alive. I wouldn't say it's a 0% chance for him to be alive, but at the same time, I think the sacrifices of leaving him around are, I'm not going to say they're horrid, but they will make another person's end feel way less valid as a whole. Because remember, this is a Yuta off nothing. He's fresh, quote unquote, but he's burned a whole bunch of cursed energy. His Shikigami / curse spirit / puppet / whatever, the husk Rika Orimoto is currently also being slashed up. Yuji Todori is also being slashed up. All these people are getting torn to ribbons by Sukuna, and none of them are hitting any black flashes. They've been burning a whole bunch of cursed energy. They don't actually have unlimited cursed. Well, Rika does, but Yuta doesn't actually have unlimited cursed energy. And unfortunately, I agree, Yuta's very, very important. He was one of our main characters of the previous series. He was the main character of Zero. But that was of Zero. Yuta Okkotsu is a side character now. Doesn't even appear until the back half of the narrative. I think he's a little, like, in terms of his modern appearances, I think he's just a little bit over 100 chapters old. Like, I forget when exactly Yuji versus Yuta takes place in the timeline, but I'm pretty confident it takes place, like, after the 117. No, I think it has to take place after, like, the 130s. So I think Mahito and Toto versus... Not Mahito and Toto. That'd be a horrible matchup. But Yuji and Toto versus Mahito, I'm pretty sure takes place in the 130s. So Yuta's so unimportant, he hasn't even shown up until the back half of the narrative. He's been backpacking the narrative ever since he showed up, don't get me wrong. But ultimately, Yuta's expendable, because he's not the main character. And ultimately, Sukuna's not his villain. And it's kind of the same fate for someone like Maki Zenin. Don't get me wrong. I love Maki. I am a serial Maki meat muncher. I would love it. Love it with a capital L-O-V. I'd be disappointed, I will admit. But I'd love it with a capital L-O-V-E if we open up next chapter and Maki and then Sukuna My hands, my hands, and like he's done. I would love it. I really wouldn't, because we wouldn't get to see also get his kit, and I feel like that would steal the kill from Itadori. But like, I wouldn't even be mad at it too much. Just like I really ain't mad at Satoru Gojo getting off screen, I wouldn't be mad if Sukuna got off screen. But at the same time, let me be realistic. Maki once again runs into the same issue that Yuta does. Sure, she is still a much more prevalent character in this newer narrative than Yuta was for the longest time. Yuta, once again, he was much more a background element for the most part. A character that was hinted at, a character that is still extremely important, a character that definitely has value, but isn't our main character anymore. Maki's kind of in the same boat. Of course, Maki's gotten more exploration than Yuta in the modern narrative. Yuta hasn't really... Like, I love him. I love the dude. And he has some character exploration, but, like, in terms of development, Maki, in comparison to Yuta, gets way more. But even still, run into the same issue. Yuta's not a main character. He simply isn't. Just like Maki isn't. Maki isn't even a deuteragonist. Like, I'll be completely honest. We spend whole chunks of the narrative devoted to Maki. Like, the whole setup into the Culling Games. And remember, the final colony of the Culling Games that we actually cover is all based on Maki. I guess you could argue it's technically Sendai, because Sukuna versus Yorozu, but I feel like that kind of transcends Culling Game stuff. In terms of the 5 major arcs, we start with Maki and end with Maki in terms of the Culling Games, with the perfect preparation arc into Culling Games. But still, she's not our main character. She's still not that important. Like, it sounds... And it feels so bad. I feel bad saying this about both of these characters. Because I love Yuta Okkotsu. I love Maki Zenin. I think they're both fantastic characters with a whole bunch of potential. But at the same time, if we're talking objectively here, neither of these characters are mainstays. Neither of these characters are the most important in the series. Neither of these characters carry the title of protagonist. And once again, it's not like they've done nothing. Notably, Yuta's already gotten his big moment. Taking off Kenjaku's head with the help of Takuma is massive. I don't care how fraudulent you want to call the boy, or how much of a bush camp you want to call him, he did it. And he gave Kenjaku time to react too, and he still blitzed him. So Yuta Okkotsu, he's played his role well. Very, very well. And Maki Zenin admittedly be a bit underwhelming if she just gets off screen at the start of 252, but still, she did some damage. She split souls on his body a little bit. Little bit. So she's done something. She showed up, she landed a little sneak attack, but let her get Toji. Worst comes to worst, because she's just not that important. She's not a main character. Not the main character. Not a deuteragonist, nothing of the sort. And unfortunately, if I'm talking about character weight, character importance, all that good stuff right there, he ain't in much better of a boat, y'all. I'll be completely honest. Hakari Kinji is darn near irrelevant. Like, I'll be completely real with you. Yuta has stakes because he was our previous main character. Good stuff. Maki has weight because we've dedicated massive sections of the narrative to her journey, to how she feels about the world, to her executing the pinnacle of her journey in the literal execution of an entire clan, to the reconciliation of herself as the new individual that she is in Sakurajima. We've done a lot with Maki. Hakari, while being introduced, I say introduced in heavy quotation marks, I didn't say soft quotation marks, in heavy quotation marks, introduced to Hakari early on in the series, it's in like one side panel. Hakari doesn't become an actual character with a name. Well, he becomes a character with a name and a face relatively early. But he doesn't become like an actual character who we get to know until post. Is it? No, I don't think it's post 150s. I think it's getting close. Like, it's very late into the narrative before we actually get to see and experience the character of Hakari Kinji. And he's ultimately just not that important. Look at his main opponent. His main opponent that he got to have ended up just being as glaze fodder for Sukuna. Look at him. Look at him. How beautiful. Like, he's just reduced the glaze. And unfortunately, Hakari kind of falls in that role too. He's just not that important. It's super, like, once again, I feel bad, especially considering a lot of these characters are some of people's favorite characters. Like, don't get me wrong. I know Hakari has a massive, super duper crazy loyal fan base that would do anything for him. I know it. I know that's a big old fact. I know that Yuta Okkotsu, jeez, I've seen it in my own comment section. I've seen it online. I've seen it in public. I've seen it everywhere. Yuta Okkotsu has a gargantuan fan base. So many people who would ride or ride till the wheels fall off with Yuta Okkotsu, essentially. Let's be real. I've seen it. I've seen the dedication, the determination. People love Yuta Okkotsu for good reason. And of course, while they aren't as prevalent as, ironically enough, the other two, I mean, there are a lot of Maki fans out there, but I don't know. A lot of people just say, oh, she's a Toji clone, and really don't like Maki. But still, putting that aside, Maki has a really, really solid fan base too. All that's fantastic. But let me level with you. The reason I think none of these characters are safe and or guaranteed is because he wasn't. He wasn't. I talked about how every single one of these characters has had portions of the narrative devoted to them, right? And like, you can definitely make an argument that Yuta in Zero is more important than Gojo, but by the time of the main narrative, the plot writes itself around Gojo. Verbatim. It's just the case. But Gojo was able to fall. He was able to fall. Gojo is more important than Hakari. I'll be honest with you. Gojo likely is more important than Maki. The only one that's debatable is Yuta out of the heavy hitters. I'll give that. It's mostly Yuta. He's the one that's debatable. And when I say debatable, I mean like debatable. Because once again, he was genuinely the main character of Zero. But look at who showed up first and who was the main attraction of the main manga. There were, like, I'll be completely honest, I didn't know who Yuta was when I started reading JJK. Because I started reading JJK after the first series, or no, the first season of the anime. I didn't know who Yuta was retroactively. I think I read Zero once it was announced that it was going to get a movie. And I was like, what the heck is that? And then I finally read Zero. But with that being the case, Yuta's rivaling, but once again, he's the second strongest sorcerer. He's the second most important side character. He ain't the first. Gojo was. So, if Satoru Gojo can fall, what guarantee am I expected to have with Hakari Kinji, a character who's barely 100 chapters old as an actual character, and has had, what, 2 notable fights throughout the entire series? One against Fodder, and the other against, like, a laser? Like, what am I really supposed to do with that? Maki Zenin, once again, amazingly important, wonderful, next level character. But she ain't Gojo for real. She really ain't. Even Yuta Okkotsu, the blessed child himself. All that hype, all that glaze. And, well, he's not really more important than Satoru Gojo, who was able to fall. So, the question becomes, are they safe? I don't think so. I really don't. But the real question is, fine, they may not be safe. They may not have the chance against Sukuna, because Sukuna is clearly Itadori's antagonist. Obviously, they won't be allowed to land the final blow. Like, we didn't believe that Yuta was going to be able to fully vaporize Sukuna with Jacob's Ladder, just as we don't believe that Maki's not going to actually just tear Sukuna in half here, despite piercing him straight in the back. We all know this. But the question of the video is, are they destined to fall? And what does that mean for the story? And the ideology of certain characters, and the motivation of certain characters, in the world itself. Well, remember what the current battle is, in essence, when breaking it down to its fundamentals. This battle is still a fundamental battle of ideals and ideologies between two men. It's a battle that has been hinted at as long as the actual battle between those two men, hundreds of chapters ago at this point. I believe it's in chapter 3 or 4. When we get the ideological battle set up, Sukuna believes that the weak do not get the right to prosper. It is only the strong, and whoever is the strongest should lead. Should be at the top, should be at the pinnacle, such is by nature. That is Sukuna's whole ideology. He reaffirms it. That's why he even began to develop some sort of respect for Yuji Itadori. This is the entire point of this encounter, when he realizes and has the existential crisis that leads to him understanding that both he and Yuji Itadori share this unbreakable ideal. But ultimately, Yuji, in a way, while fighting for his own unbreakable ideal, he's still a representative for another man's unbreakable ideal. That man being Satoru Gojo. Now, of course, it's easy to forget, considering what 236 kind of implies a lot for the character. But remember, Satoru Gojo had one goal in mind. He wanted to raise strong allies. He wanted to guarantee a good future. He wanted to raise the kids right, and he wanted to show that the old, archaic ways of the Jujutsu system were not valid. That power shouldn't rule everything. The elders shouldn't have full control. It should be up to the next generation. And the next generation will be able to strike back and take control of the world that they so rightly deserve. He believed that. He prepared the kids for it. And ultimately, this runs into the question, right? Because, unlike Ryomen Sukuna, whose ideal will be kind of proven wrong when he loses, Gojo Satoru, despite being sliced in half, despite being gone for what? I think like 6 months now? Like, what? It was September? It's now approaching March. Like, he's been gone for a minute now. Technically, his ideal is still living on. It's still fighting. It's still breathing. Through his students, through everyone who's come to fight, through everyone not just running away. They, in a way, have been upholding that unbreakable ideal of Satoru Gojo. The ideal that others will be able to strike back against the world that has wronged them. And we've seen them strike back. We've seen them do this. But the question then becomes, okay, does the I'm not going to say, does the ideological battle supersede the physical battle? The reasoning. Should we sacrifice the narrative integrity, specifically for one right now? Should we sacrifice the narrative integrity and the potency of World Slash in order to maintain Gojo Satoru's ideal by having Yuta Okkotsu survive it? Of course, like I said, he's the one that's on the docket right now. Of course, we could open up with Maki being in half next chapter, but he's the main one we're worried about in this moment. And of course, once again, once we finally cut back to him, or once we finally get to see him again, even Hakari Kinji is definitely in contention for being in some extreme, serious danger, considering what could happen to him if he runs into Sukuna, who could just his head right off, or his brain right off, or do a little something crazy like that, especially if he lands a World Slash. Does the story's idea of the super ideological battle between Gojo Satoru and Ryomen Sukuna necessitate that the heavy hitters survive in order to prove his point right and Sukuna's point wrong? There are two ways to take it. The answer could be yes, and the answer could be no. For the yes, the students being alive and beating Sukuna and Urume and Kenjaku all on their own and surviving it all, that would literally be I think, yeah, verbatim. It would be Gojo Satoru's ability and his ideology. Why can I not say words? His ideology proving true. He himself, a member born of the old antiquated system, was unable to do it. But what did the next generation do? They took care of what he could not. They followed in his footsteps and ended up taking down the King of Curses and his entourage. That would be beautiful. That would be wonderful. That would be amazing, right? So that means they're all safe. They have to be. Because if they all fall, all the heavy hitters fall, then we're cooked, right? Gojo's idea was cooked. Gojo himself was cooked. We're going to end up being cooked because we're losing a bunch of fan favorite characters. It's awful. It's horrible. It's not necessary, though. Unfortunately, once again, we go back into the idea of the importance of these characters and their general standing relative to the rest of the narrative. Once again, none of the heavy hitters are the main character. Not a single one of them is. None of them are. You know who is the main character? Yuji Itadori. You know who else is a major character? Megami Fushiguro. You know, out of all these characters, who has the most direct tie to the antagonism and the destruction caused by Ryomen Sukuna? Megami Fushiguro and Yuji Itadori. Two of the next generation, younger than all the generation we're talking about today, in the second years and the third years, in the heavy hitters, all of whom could complete Gojo's ideal if they beat Sukuna. That's the thing. Gojo's ideal does not have to be absolute. It simply doesn't. Look at Nobara. Technically, Nobara ruins Gojo's ideal because she fell. We haven't seen Toto in forever. Technically, that's Gojo's ideal, his faith in Toto, falling apart. Gei's clearly not afraid to break a couple eggs to make that omelet. So, ultimately, in spite of the narrative weight that goes behind the ideological battle between Gojo and Sukuna, and essentially the thesis of Jujutsu Kaisen, the idea of what shall prevail, the old versus the new, unfortunately, the heavy hitters just aren't required for that. They truly and honestly aren't. And it leaves them in a really rough spot, where they're all expendable. Every last one of them. You can let them do things. You can let them be super duper important. Like I said, this guy right here took down this guy right here. That is invaluable. Kenjaku's no longer an issue. They stop Sukuna, and Megami's still sane enough. He doesn't start the merger. He made free Tengen or whatever from whatever he could do, but he wouldn't start the merger. That's very important stuff. Removing Kenjaku off the table is crazy. Hakari Kinji holding off Ume is insanely important and crazy. And Maki Zenin, even if it's just one hit, presumably just one hit she lands on Sukuna, that's still all crazy and unbelievably important and next level relevant and stuff like that. But ultimately, it's just that. Bits of progress. Satoru Gojo in the end was reduced to a piece of progress. Kashimo Hajime in the end was reduced to a piece of progress. And even Higuruma Hiromi was reduced to a piece of progress. All things meant to push the narrative forward. Make it so that it's more and more feasible that the true main character, the real MC, no matter what other people say about him, that he stands supreme at the end. Supremely alone, of course. Like, this doesn't, just trust me when I say Yuji winning in the end does not guarantee a happy ending. Yuji and Megami winning in the end does not guarantee a happy ending. None of that guarantees a happy ending. I think the happy ending route to JJK has been lost. We're getting a bittersweet one, whether we want it or not. I do not see anyone suddenly coming back and saying, this is our Jujutsu Kaisen, and then we all walk off happily into the sunset. That's not happening. But ultimately, Yuji's still alive. And he will be alive. He's the eye of the storm. He's the centerpiece of it all. Megami Fushiguro, he may be sweepy and really shad, but ultimately, he's still alive. He's still inside. These two are what can properly represent Gojo Satoru's ideal. These two are necessary. These two are the truest and most basic forms of the fundamental pillars of what could be next for Jujutsu Society. So in the end, I say this. I don't think it's absolutely necessary that all the heavy hitters need to go. And I think it would only reinforce Gojo Satoru's ideals if they did all live. I'm talking Hakari, I'm talking Yuta, I'm talking Maki. Especially Yuta. Even at the integrity or risking the integrity of the narrative through sacrificing the potency of World Slash by having Yuta live, there are ways you can write around it so it's fine, based on what the mechanics of the narrative have already set up, and I think that once again would play into Gojo winning the ideological battle against Sukuna, even if he lost the physical one. But at the same time, I'll wholeheartedly admit, despite my want for all of them to live, or two of them to live, or one of them to live, I wouldn't be shocked if none of them lived. Because none of them are necessary. They are all accent pieces to the true main character. And that's unfortunate for them. It's a terrible fate. However, that's what I think. Please tell me what you guys think in the comment section down below. I'd like to thank you so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, please leave Slamma Jamma. Like literally slam jam in the comment section down below. I would like to thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you hit that little notification bell so you not miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do happen to have a Patreon down below where you can support me for as little as $1 a month to get things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as little as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Some of those perks include a live reaction to the very next chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen, along with ad-free variations of all my videos. And if you become a $25 patron or a $25 member, you can order whatever video you want. Now, I'd like to thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is Dag on the Pencil, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our $3 members, O'Connor Plays, Greyhound, Akids Void, Astro, and Red Wolf 4765. I'd like to give another thank you to our $5 patrons, Victor, Steron, Sean, RNG Master, Midnight Lord 21, Kevin, Jermaine, Igneal, EHAC1. And I'd like to give another thank you to our $7 members, Autumn, Mornings Lazo, Jan, Toma. And I'd like to give another gargantuan thank you to our $10 member, Jay Warrior. And I'd like to give another thank you to our two $10 patrons, Joaquin and Item Okami. And I'd like to give a hefty thank you to our $25 member, Alex Ice Rose. And I'd like to give another gargantuan thank you to our $25 patron, Winter. Another hefty thank you to our $25 patron, ChinaDoll09. And a final gargantuan thank you to our $25 patron, Calvin Elder.